Hello, hello. Welcome. And please say hello to anyone in the chat who pops through. And this is it's me. And what I think we're talking about today is genetic memory. And this is an idea turn my thing down. And this is an idea that we biologically inherit memories of our ancestors. And what we know really easily is that we have DNA in every single cell of our body. We have the same genetic imprint that is the chemical accumulation of our ancestors, of all of our biological lineage. And we are learning more and more about what kinds of things actually have like a measurable genetic component. And we are also learning that things like stress and trauma and environmental events, things like that, can be genetically retained. And we are learning that developmental trauma, childhood trauma, even something as mundane as a childhood surgery can affect what's happening in the body at the genetic level, because the way this works is that every single cell of our body has a nucleus. Memory. Okay, so every single cell of our body has nucleus right in here, right? And that's where the DNA lives. And there is machinery inside the cell called a ribosome, right? Endoplasmic reticulum. See, we know things. So there's machinery inside of the cell that takes the information from our DNA, basically makes a copy of it, scans it, Xeroxes it. Can I say Xerox on YouTube? I don't know. Makes a copy of it and then transcribes it into a protein. Okay, everything in the body is proteins. It's like proteins and water and like some sugar and salts. It's good stuff. And that's what's happening all of the time. So since everything in our body is proteins, thinking about enzymes, thinking about receptors for neurotransmitters, thinking about the chemical communication that is moving through the body all the time is proteinous in nature, meaning that it was actually manufactured from the blueprint that is the genetic code. And that whole process is what we call expression, genetic expression, that what happens in the translation between the base genetic material and the actual manufactured protein is expression. Taking something from the inside and bringing it into visibility. Expression. Don't we love vocabulary? So genetic expression is affected by things that happen to us in our life, by all of the mechanisms that we've been talking about, by our past experiences, by our memories, by our retained traumas, and even by what our body has unconsciously interpreted from our environment. And all of those things are going to play into this conversation of genetic memory. Because the reality is that we do retain information from our ancestors genetically. And that means that there's information about our ancestors' illnesses and diseases, and stresses and traumas that we were born with. That's the scientific reality, that we inherit a lineage, and that lineage is biochemically expressed in every cell of our body all the time. That's cool, right? I think that that's fascinating, and also might be deeply problematic to think about, because that's a lot of information that's in there. I don't know very much about my biological lineage. I know some, and I know people who love researching their ancestry, and I know people who never met their grandparents. And there's a spectrum. But biologically, biochemically, genetically, those stories are inside. So what do we do? What do we do with all of that information? I have some ideas. Last week, you all saw me do a somatic practice, a somatic journey, a somatic exploration, meaning that I gave my body permission to just move around, feel a stretch here, and just be in my body. And I did that for about 20 minutes. And if you want to know what that looked like, then look at last week's office hour number 4. So that gives you a window into what this eventually looks like for my body. Your body will be your body. And what I have to go through with you here are some of the things that I mentioned in the description of last week's video. Oscillations, which we talked about before, and primordial movements. And primordial movements include a few different categories that I want to go through with you. And I want to talk about the specific oscillations that we might stir those primordial movements with, because that's what an oscillation is, right? It's a back and forth, up and down, round and around, oscillatory rhythm, wave, energy. Everything is energy. Energy has to move. Energy moves in waves, and we are no different from that. And so let's start with the primordial movements, and let's just understand what I mean by that is things like this. This is, there we go, trying to hold it so that it doesn't make you seasick. I'm sorry. There you are. This is what we look for in a human infant over the first 12 months of motor development. The ability to lift your head, the ability to look around, the ability to push the ground away in order to free up increased mobility, in order to free up the use of upper extremities, in order to figure out how to coordinate upper body with lower body, left body with right body, front body with back body, up and down, side to side, away we go. Now, some of us don't get to all of those steps for whatever reason, and some of us skip steps for whatever reason. And what that does is it affects our body's ability to sequence these skills. And that can create any number of tensions in the somatic mechanism in the physical body. And that tension can be literal myofascial tension, because we've sequenced this particular pull in a way that like puts a spot somewhere, puts a knot somewhere. It can be tension psychologically, because if we don't know how to move and negotiate with our environment in the way that we evolved to do so, then that can impact our perception and our ability to process the environmental information around us. And it can affect our ability to process what we're receiving somatically, what we're receiving internally from our body, because that can turn into kind of an overwhelming experience when we didn't go through all of those stages of initiation that we were designed for. And I mean designed in the sense that like this evolved over time in order to be suited to a particular way of being. It accumulated in our genetics over time. That is the design. Because it's a mechanism. And form follows function, which you've heard me say before. So the functionality is number one. Everything else will accumulate around the functionality. And if it's a successful function, if it's a function worth retaining, it's a function that helps us survive, because that's how the whole thing works. That's evolution. Where were we? Motor milestones. So we want to know how to do all that stuff. We want to be able to like go from our belly to our elbows, to hands and knees crawling, to walking, being able to stand on one leg, being able to stand on the other leg, being able to reach for something at the same time, being able to look around in the environment while we're in these different planes of existence. Those are exercises. Those are bodily exercises that we can do just like you saw me do. So, other primordial movements, push and pull. Push and pull. Do I want it to go away from me? Do I want to bring it to me? An undulation. An undulation is this. It's the movement that we see in our digestive system. Peristalsis. It's what an earthworm looks like when it moves. And it's the way that our spine is capable of moving. A lot of joints in the spine, a lot of moving parts, a lot of really tiny muscles, a lot of potential movement in the spine. And the spine was designed, or it wouldn't have all of those moving parts, designed to be really mobile. And when we actually exercise that full range of motion and we strengthen that full range of motion instead of only strengthening like these really rigid movement patterns that aren't organic, that are manufactured movement patterns. So we strengthen the full range of motion, and then we can enjoy the full range of motion safely. And that's how we like it. So we're probably like feeling the oscillation, right? So briefly here, directionality. We can oscillate up and down. And that can be like squat, deadlift, heel raise, up and down. It can be just in the arms. It can be the full body. Up and down, in and out. Think about the breath. Think about the breath. In and out, we breathe in, feel the space. Breathe out, feel the release. Let it be a release. Let it go. Let it go all the way out. Feel how your belly muscles can squeeze it all the way out. Feel how your voice can push it all the way out, all the way out, all the way out. And then how much breath can we pull in after we've squeezed out that space? In and out. You can play with that all day long. Anterior, posterior, front body to back body. Something as simple as this movement here. If I lean back enough that I can feel the muscles on the front of my body, I can feel the muscles on the front of my neck kick in to hold that line. And then I lean over and I feel the back of my body kick in to hold that line. Can I oscillate between those planes? Central to peripheral. So core, and then your periphery is out here. Can we hold stability in the core and have movement out at the periphery? Anytime you're doing weight-bearing exercises, especially heavy weight-bearing exercises, that's really important, right? Is that the core is stabilized so that we maintain good pressure around the organs, so that we maintain stability and support of the spine, so that all of this can serve as a firm foundation for whatever other freedom of motion we need elsewhere in order to complete the task successfully. So central to peripheral, and being able to feel and coordinate differentiation. Because if I'm clenched in my core, I need to have freedom of motion in my extremities, or else I'm going to be fighting with my own resistance a bit. If your body has this all or nothing response when a task is at hand, it just takes a lot of energy. And it probably creates more tension in the mechanism than you need. And that's why people end up having a sore neck after they work out, or if a certain exercise bothers the lower back because it's over engaging. There's balance between the level of effort and the level of freedom in the body. Stability and strength. Stability, mobility. Strength and stretch. Between floppy, flaccid, weak, hypermobile, excess movement. And then on the other side of that is rigidity, stiffness, guardedness. In the middle of that is elasticity. And elasticity will make things easier. Easier to move, easier to pull back again. If we're over rigid, we're using a lot of energy, and then we have to pull ourselves out of that. Hypermobility has its own set of complexities, and there's a balance between the two. Left and right, of course, And there's the oscillation between yes and no. And you all have seen me bring a yes into the body. So taking one finger on your chin so you can feel where your center is, feel where neutral is. And then just small movement. It's all right here. Small movement to find that yes. Or small movement to find that no. And for now, I'm doing this with my head in a little bit of a bow because most of us spend more time than we need with our chin up in the air. So pulling that chin down just a little bit, opening the suboccipital, relaxing a circle around the base of your skull so that your brain and your spinal cord can flow freely right there. So we have yes, and we have no, and we have undulation. And then what we do is we take that freedom and we stack it with some of those primordial movements. If I'm in a crawling position, if I'm in quadruped, hands and knees, how does it feel to go through those movements again? The same range of motion. Keep it soft, keep it gentle. We're not like trying to crank ourselves in any particular way. Just use the muscles and use the joints and use what's there to explore your immediate environment, central to peripheral. Push and pull. And so you can do that, right? I was pushing energy there. And you can do that against a wall. You can do that on the floor. You can do it on the kitchen counter. You can do it all the way on your hands. You can do it supported on elbows. You can do it with your hands on the arms of a chair that is stable, not a rocking chair. Like, give yourself support. Give your body support to make these explorations feel very safe and very comfortable. Don't work too hard. But it's an exploration into these patterns, these sequences of movement. How did your body learn how to do that at the beginning? When you were 3 months old, when you were 6 months old, when you were 9 months old, how did your body figure that out? Because you weren't consciously like, oh, well, let me see. This worked well last time, so this time maybe I'll try this. You're not doing that as an infant. You are in an embodied exploration to see what works. And whatever strategy you figured out initially, imprinted as a patterned sequence in your nervous system. And that is the basement level of motor imprinting that is constantly influencing the way that we consume information from our environment and from our inner sensation, from our embodied awareness of whether or not we're okay, whether or not this is a good place to be. Do I want to push this away from me, or am I like, yeah, give me some more of that? Pushing and pulling is primordial, and you can practice it. Again, you can push on a wall. You can pull on a tree, starting with something that is going to be very stable to just feel into these movements with your body can be really helpful. Resistance is helpful. We talked about that a few weeks ago. Resistance is helpful. It gives us something to work with. It gives us feedback about how these mechanisms are actually flowing, because remember that everything is energy and energy is moving. There is flow, and there is potentially interference in some of these mechanisms, friction, momentum, leverage. This can go in all different kinds of directions. And the reality is that it's usually going in a lot of different directions all at the same time, which can feel like a lot of information to process. This is how we calibrate the mechanism so that the mechanism has the hardware for the traffic, the electrical traffic in the body, to move as efficiently as possible, to move easily, to move with flow. This is calibrating. That's all. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of yes, a little bit of no, a little bit of up, a little bit of down. Undulation. Breathing in, expanding, breathing out, releasing. Just let it go. Because that next breath in will come. What goes up will come down. Because this oscillatory quality is universal. It's just how the energy moves. And we can trust that. We can depend on that because we can feel it. And again, when you feel it in your body, you don't need to take my word for it. And I don't really want you to. I want you to feel it in your body because it feels pleasant. To feel safe and empowered and capable and strong and smart and important. All of that feels good. And it feels good to feel like there's something important to share. So this evening, I'm going to an event here locally, which is just a social event for neurodivergent adults. And I have some thoughts about that. And this video is already getting a little bit long. So I'll tell you what. Next Wednesday, I will tell you all about this event, and I will tell you all a little bit more about why I think that those things are relevant. Remember that we were talking about genetic memory. Genetic memory. And if the way that we show up in our environment, the way that we are able to bring in and digest information about our environment and about our inner self, our inner space, our embodied experience, processing that information. Sensory processing is a really big part of the conversation around neurodivergence, which I have no formal training in, to be clear. I was a gifted kid in the 80s. That's what they had. But here's some things. I made a list that I know you all can't read from there, about primitive reflexes. And that's part of this primitive primordial motor system that we're starting to explore. These primordial movements combined with these planes of movement within which we oscillate. There are reflexes that we are born with that are in our genetics. Just like when you go to the doctor and they hammer on your knee and your leg kicks out, it's a reflex. It's just built in. It's built into the operating system. And what is supposed to happen during the first 12 months of life is that those reflexes get integrated, meaning they don't happen unconsciously, meaning that we now have conscious agency, conscious control over those movements in our body. And there's lots and lots of detail to go into on this subject, so I'm going to keep it high level for now. When those reflexes do not get integrated, they create kind of an interesting list of symptoms. And this is research that I have gathered. This is not something that's coming out of my brain, but I'm just going to read off a couple of things. Retained primitive reflexes, sensory processing disorder, easily startled or overwhelmed, generalized sensitivity to light, sound, and texture, pelvic issues, postural issues, vertigo, restlessness, difficulty concentrating, difficulty making decisions. If you don't have access to your yes and no, that makes decisions a lot harder, doesn't it? And there's a lot more on this list that got me thinking, doesn't that sound a lot like some of these presentations of ADHD, autism, the expanding spectrum of neurodivergence, that especially for adults who did not receive support during childhood, they did not receive an adequate explanation or validation of their experience. A lot of adults are looking for explanation and validation of why they feel the way they feel in their life. And I'm just saying, like, it seems like there might be some overlap there. So we're going to talk more about that, because I think that is really interesting. Because what I'm going to offer is the idea that the neurodivergence itself is not the problem. That there are very real bodily manifestations that are uncomfortable, that can coincide with that neurodivergence, and that's well documented. Like I said, this is not my research, this is not my science, this is Googleable. I'm writing a bigger piece about all of this, so it will have a bibliography and all of that sort of thing. But right now we're in the research phase. But if the neurodivergence is related to the way that we can take in and process information, sensory information about our environment and about our inner experience, that sometimes there's so much information coming in that it's like noise and it's overwhelming. And sometimes that feels like overwhelm, and sometimes that feels like collapse and shutdown because there's just this dissociation that happens and the mind is like, yeah, I'm out. What do you think? What do you think about it? I found this image in my research, and I'm gonna again try to hold it up there. This is not my image. This is not my research. This is copyright Diana Cameron from Uncover Autism. But this, copyright 2018, by the way, and this validated this idea of working through the body, working through the mechanism, working through the basement level wiring in order to create perceivable changes in the way that the user experiences their environment, their social interactions, and their intrinsic experience of self. And at the top of the pyramid here, we've got behavior, cognition, academic skills, daily living. And when we work from the bottom up, then we can build something trustworthy. To stand on, to push from, to pull from, to undulate with. But there's trust from the bottom, from the ground, all the way up. I just think that's neat. Get comfortable with your breath. Get comfortable with your yes. Get comfortable with your no. Get comfortable with your voice and allowing it to express more of what's really going on for you, even if it's just to yourself in an empty room. Also a big fan of writing things in a journal, pen and paper. Get, central to peripheral, oscillation, transmutation, translation. But getting some of those thoughts just out of your mind and onto something tangible can feel like relief, can feel like a way to offload some of that energy. And let things feel wobbly. If you're practicing standing on one leg, you're gonna wobble. You're gonna wobble sometimes. Heel to toe, heel to toe. Feel your feet. And once you can feel that foundation, this is weird trying to do this looking at the screen, right? But can I feel that? Can I push into that? And push overhead at the same time that my leg on the floor is still pushing down. So centrally, I've remained stationary. Peripherally, I have all of this movement to find. These are movements that are present, that are represented. These combinations are well represented in yoga, in qigong, in tai chi, in any number of other systems. My hypothesis is that this is why they work so well, among other reasons. But it's because it's helping to sequence the nervous system, and it's helping to tone and polish and streamline the way that energy is moving through these train tracks of imprinted patterning. And it's all malleable. It's all programmable. This is calibrating. How do you want to show up? How do you want to show up in your body? And I'm going to offer 3 C's today. 3 C's to help answer that question. Number 1, compassionately. Because it can be hard and scary and overwhelming and even painful to show up in that body. It can be. So compassion for that. And remember that we're all in this together. We all are doing this work sooner or later. So compassion. C number 2 is courage. This is brave work. It's bravery to seek oneself and look inside oneself. Because there's like crazy stuff in there sometimes, right? That's okay. All of that lineage that we talked about, all of that genetic memory, there's all kinds of stuff in there that you didn't even ask for. And it might be a little intense to look at some of that stuff. Courage and compassion. We're in this together. Number 3 is curiosity. Because that's what keeps it fun and fresh and not too serious. It's supposed to be fun. I think it is. So, let me know what questions you have. And I will see you all this time next week, Wednesdays at noon, office hour. If you pop in while I'm streaming, please say hello in the chat. And if you have a question that I can potentially help address with you, I would be honored if you would drop it in there, and I'll be watching for it. My name is Christina Jensen. This is Brightside Integrative Physical Therapy. We're just doing the things. We're on the journey. Thank you for being here.